How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. This is my video channel inspired by my Instagram channel, 1985 Road Dog. On that Instagram, you'll find photos of my time in music as a fan, as somebody that worked in the music business, on the road, at record companies, DJ. You'll find not all, but a lot of my photos from those days, and that inspired this, which is kind of like the story behind the photo kind of thing. But it's expanded since then. My book has been released, Tales from the Gutter and Other Rock and Roll Shenanigans. That details my life in music as well, from a teenage fan all the way up through the 80s into the 90s. So pick that up if you're into music memoirs. But today I wanted to talk about the word rock star. Steve Riley just passed, and it got me thinking about bands and musicians, and the term rock star gets thrown around a lot. Like it's used a lot to describe musicians, current or older musicians. It's like party like a rock star. The whole rock star thing is like, well, what is a rock star really? And so many musicians, 80s, 90s, and beyond, call themselves or are being called by others a rock star. But to me, there's only a handful of rock stars in the world. You have to really go back to the earliest days of what was termed a rock star. Up until the late 60s, late 1960s, there were not rock anything. It was pop. It was a pop star. If they talked about the Rolling Stones in the British press in 1965 or 66, they were called pop stars. There were no such thing as a rock star. Rock came much later when things got harder. Post psychedelic music, the beginnings of heavy music. So to me, the first real rock star was probably Mick Jagger. The Stones laid the blueprint for what a rock band is. And, the Stones by 1972 were in the company of such a wide variety of people. I mean, they'd hobnob with, kings and queens and princesses and that kind of thing. Not kings and queens, but princes, princesses, Euro trash royalty, and musicians, and druggy people, and beatniks, and hippies. I mean, the Stones just attracted everybody and commanded the attention, but also the respect. Jagger took a lot of stuff, a lot of crap, in those days for high ticket prices and all kinds of things. But the Stones could easily float between worlds of all different kinds. Most musicians couldn't get out of their own thing. They hung with other musicians or people in the business, or kind of, a fringe druggy kind of a crowd. But most musicians weren't hanging out with political people. The Stones by the 80s were, had influence all over the world politically, meaning they could fly into a town and, the local mayor or the governor or whoever senator would make sure that they had police protection, or they had, the police escort to and from the venue and all this kind of stuff. When it came time where people had troubles with visas or working permits and all this kind of stuff, the Stones were able to reach into their, phone book of people that they've come in contact with and met and befriended over the years. And the Stones, when they tour, even like now, it's like, it's like the president's in town with the security and the level of local government police protection favors that are done because they're the biggest rock and roll band in the world. Mick Jagger took that term. To me, he was the first real rock star, and he still is, because he still holds the influence, still holds the power, still holds a celebrity loaded with cash. Not many people can retain not only the cash and the celebrity and the status, but the cool and not selling out so much. So, you know, the new Stones is a whole different thing. I'll talk about that in another video, the latest, the new Stones, I call them. But rock star, what's a rock star? Who's a rock star? You know, it doesn't last very long. And what I consider a rock star is, you know, somebody that is, or a band full of rock stars that are selling millions and millions and millions of records, making millions and millions and millions of dollars, but still being true to who and what they are. Difficult to do. You know, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin. When I was, 17 years old, those guys were serious rock stars. Page and Plant were like, you didn't see them anywhere. They weren't hanging out at the local 7-Eleven or, whatever. They were rock stars. They, Jimmy Page dabbling in black magic and Aleister Crowley and all this stuff, and teenage groupies out in L.A. and trashing hotels, but they didn't really trash hotels. Maybe the crew did, but those guys are rock stars to this day. David Bowie. Let's go to the dead guys. I made a little list here. Brian Jones, Rolling Stones. That guy was probably the first rock star and inspired Mick Jagger to become a rock star, and Keith. But Brian Jones was probably the original rock star. Look into Brian Jones, man. Mick and Keith got everything from that guy. He couldn't write a song, Brian Jones, but he was cool and knew the vibes and had the vibes. And they just kind of like, once Brian Jones passed, they kind of like adopted Brian Jones' persona. Both of those guys. Look at Mick and Keith before Brian Jones passed. And then once he passed, look at them after and how they dressed and what they did. They were like, took pieces of Brian Jones. Anyway, I'm a Brian Jones fan. People that have passed: Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, Freddie Mercury. Most of those guys, Jones, Joplin, Morrison, Hendrix, all in the 27 Club, all died at 27 years old. So they are forever cemented in public consciousness as they were when they passed. That's the image everyone has. That's the music everyone has. They'll forever be rock stars. All those people, Brian Jones, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, will forever be rock stars. Freddie Mercury lived much longer, but he was a true rock star. Freddie was as decadent and as crazy and as wild as they came, but super talented, as we all know, songwriter, vocalist, singer. He was a wild guy. I've heard a lot of Freddie Mercury stories from people that were there. Rock star, man, to the end. Elvis doesn't count because Elvis was a cultural phenomenon. Elvis, along with Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and Jerry Lee Lewis, those guys invented rock and roll, really. I really call Little Richard the inventor of rock and roll, the king of rock and roll, Little Richard. Elvis was a bit of a watered-down version of that, which with a lot more charisma, great-looking guy. It was just a phenomenon, Elvis. It was like it never happened again. So Elvis was, I wouldn't call Elvis a rock star either. Elvis was just a star, period. There was no rock. Elvis was it. So, then there you go. I mean, who do you have now? Who's still alive? Bob Dylan, rock star by default. Never sold out. Never lost his cool. Never lost his mojo, Dylan. Still, to this day, rock star. Paul McCartney, what can you say? He's a Beatle. Like Ringo, McCartney's a rock star. Money, status, power, cool, still has the chops, rock star. Steven Tyler, rock star. To this day, never, ever was anybody but Steven Tyler. And through being that, he gained fame twice fortunes twice, Steven Tyler's a rock star. But who else? I mean, you know, could you say Bon Jovi's a rock star? I don't think Bon Jovi's a rock star. Bon Jovi's super successful, lots of money, lots of fame, lots of record sales. But, you know, he's like a pop guy. He's not a rock star. He was never a druggy, partier, crazy guy doing crazy stuff. He was always too clean, you know. So I wouldn't call Bon Jovi a rock star. He's successful, sure. Who else? I don't know, from the 80s. I don't know, Motley Crue. I mean, I don't consider those guys rock stars anymore. Motley Crue were rock stars from 1983 to 1990. That's when Motley Crue were rock stars. Money, sales, fame, success, drugs, girls, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Motley Crue aren't rock stars anymore. I mean, I don't know what they are. You know, I don't want to get on a Motley Crue rant. Go to Kiss. Kiss were the severe rock stars, the biggest rock stars all through the 70s. But by 1980, Kiss really weren't rock stars anymore. And now I mean, to me, and I'm not trying to bash Kiss. I love Kiss, old Kiss. But today, it's just like, I don't know, man. It's like an embarrassment to the legacy of that band. It's just like, listen, Paul and Gene don't need the money. It's all about ego. It's ego. The great destroyer of talent is ego. Those guys have tons of money. It's ego. It's the same with Mick Jagger. He's got tons of money. It's ego and fame and adulation and girls and, you know, 20-year-old girls hanging out backstage. That's what he's in it for. And, you know, he enjoys being a rock star. But Gene and Paul should have retired a long time ago. It's embarrassing to me. It's like seeing Batman like old. It's just terrible. And I understand for people that never saw Kiss, it's great to go see Kiss. But me, I only want to see bands in their prime. Who wants to see a band that's below par, staying around too long? It's just like, I guess if you've never seen the band, you want to see the band. But man, the term rock star just gets thrown around, a loose term. There's not many rock stars. David Lee Roth, Eddie Van Halen, rock stars. For the life of the original Van Halen up until 1984 album, those guys were rock stars. The lifestyle, the money, the fame. But now, I mean, David Lee Roth, I mean, I don't know. You know, he's not a rock star anymore. I don't care what you call him. He's not a rock star. He's a celebrity. The term rock star was very, you know, when I was a kid, a teenager in the 70s, that term was like, you just didn't call anybody a rock star, you know. Was Ozzy a rock star in Black Sabbath? No. You know, Black Sabbath was an underground band. They weren't on the radio, really. They didn't have massive sales. They just toured and toured and toured. You know, the Eagles were huge. Those guys weren't rock stars. I mean, people didn't even know who was in the band. They just knew the songs. So the Eagles were massive. One of the biggest bands in the world. No one knows who's in the band, really. Maybe you can name Don Henley. I mean, that's about it. So the term rock star, man, it's a cherished term to me. You know, there's not many left, and I keep hearing terms about rock stars. You know, I mean, you have to be a rock star. You have to sell a lot of records to me. You have to make tons of money to me. You have to not change who you are and live your life as you always did, and be unapologetic and just be a rock and just live the life. But most bands didn't sell enough records, and they're calling these guys rock stars. They didn't, you know, they weren't big enough, but they're like being termed rock stars. You know, B-level, C-level bands from the 80s and the 90s. It's just like, you know, I live near a casino, you know, who's playing soon? Lit and somebody else. It's just like, you know, those guys aren't rock stars. God bless. They're playing casinos. They're making money. They had at least one song. All you need is one song. You can get on the casino circuit if it was a pretty big song. So I see all those bands playing these casinos, Lit, Hinder, Three Doors Down, all these bands. So I'm not knocking them. I'm saying, but none of those guys are rock stars. There's not many left, man. And the ones that are left are way beyond their prime. Or somebody like Robert Plant, for example, knows he can't go out there and sing Stairway to sing all those old Led Zeppelin songs and A Whole Lot of Love and all these songs. I mean, maybe he can, but it's never going to sound like 1975. And he knows that. That's why there's never been a Led Zeppelin reunion. He is no fool, Robert Plant. He does his occasional gig. He'll get up with a band and sing a folk version of Stairway to Heaven or something. And he's got plenty of money. He doesn't need to be in the limelight. He's Robert Plant. The guy co-wrote with Jimmy Page Stairway to Heaven, A Whole Lot of Love, all the great Zeppelin. He doesn't need to prove himself. And he doesn't. He's chills. He makes his money every year. He's getting his checks and he's loaded anyway. So the guy's a rock star. Not many rock stars get grandfathered in like that into decades. Led Zeppelin, what was their first record? 1969? So 69, the 70s, and Led Zeppelin disbanded in 80. So they had 12 years, 11 years. And, the fact that Led Zeppelin never reformed, they did a show here or there, which were not good. They never been a Led Zeppelin reunion or, and all that kind of thing. So they haven't sullied the name. So yes, Page and Plant and John Paul Jones are rock stars. That band ended, John Bonham died, Led Zeppelin ends, and that's it. They did other things, Page and Plant, they did other stuff, but they knew they could not kill the name Led Zeppelin. So to me, so many bands are out there killing the name. It's just destroying the name. But it's just but who am I, man? I'm just a guy yapping on YouTube. But I saw hundreds and hundreds of bands in my life, maybe thousands. So I grew up at a time when people were still playing music from the 50s. And then the 60s didn't start rocking, man, until 66, 65, Satisfaction came out. And, so I lived through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I've seen all of the golden music, the golden period of music, popular music, rock and roll, soul, funk, disco, heavy metal, new wave. I've seen it all and lived through it all. And, there's not many rock stars that can really call themselves rock stars today, to me. There's a handful. And, the internet is full of, this guy's a rock star. What does that mean anymore? What does it mean? Hip-hop guys are saying they're like rock stars. So what does it mean anymore? The term has changed. The meaning of the term has definitely changed from the original version of what it was supposed to mean. You look at some of these tickets. I see people paying I paid $7,000 to see Drake, up in the nosebleed seats, or I spent $10,000 or more. People are spending to go see Taylor Swift. It's that's the equivalent of going to see Disney on Ice to me. It's I don't, there's no musical value there. There's a lot of Taylor Swift fans, but I'm not one of them. I don't know, man. People paying $10,000, $20,000 to sit in shitty seats to see Taylor Swift. It's like paying $10,000 or $20,000 to see Disney on Ice to me. But anyway, what do I know? I'm just an old guy yapping away on the internet. Anyway, that's enough, man. I'm looking here at the time. It's 19 minutes already. Thank you for listening to me babble about rock stars. Check out my Instagram, 1985 Road Dog. My book Instagram is Tales from the Gutter. And my book is called Tales from the Gutter and Other Rock and Roll Shenanigans. It's available on Amazon, hardcover, softcover, Kindle. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're all well. Stay well and speak to you soon. Ciao.